What's going on, guys? It's me, Zach, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. In this one, I'm going to go over a few players that I'm looking to buy low and sell high on ahead of week 5. It's been a really exciting first 4 weeks of the season, but it's really important to make sure that we stay fluid and make sure that our teams get better over the course of the season. It's just really important to evaluate where your team stands after each single week and make sure that you can try and make it better. In one of my leagues, I'm in 5 leagues this year. I've been doing really well in 4 of them, but in one, I'm 1-3, and I already made 2 trades today, and I might not be done. And one of those trades was really big. I traded away Jonathan Taylor. You can go check my Twitter if you want to see the trade I made. But you got to be willing to make big moves, especially if you're struggling. And I think that trading is definitely one of the ways that you can make your teams better. It's probably the fastest way to fix your team if you can get lucky in doing it. So it's definitely something I like to do often. It's probably my favorite part of fantasy, other than watching the games, obviously. But I love making trades in fantasy. It's definitely some of the more fun ways. Definitely one of the ways that I find myself differentiating myself over the course of a season. So I love doing this. These are my favorite videos to make for you guys as well, and I often take my own advice, and I'll make sure I highlight which of these players I personally have traded as well when I go forward with this. But with that, I do want to take a minute to thank everyone for all the support we've been getting. We've been doing great with all these recent videos. We've been getting tons of views, and we're up to just over 280 subscribers, so we're closing in on that goal of 300. Love to get there, so if you are new to the channel, thank you for stopping by. Please do take a minute to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you get notifications when we put out videos. Put out 3 videos a week along with rankings every single week. So if you do want to refer to those rankings as well for start sit decisions, you're more than welcome to go to my website at realsteelffb.com. That all those rankings are free for you guys to use whenever you want. So feel free to use that resource if you want to. But with that, let's get into the first set of players that I'm looking to trade this week. The first buy low for me this week is going to be Gabe Davis. This one does hurt me a little bit because I actually traded him away in one of my leagues this week. That today, actually, this is Tuesday. So did hurt doing that, but I got a pretty good deal in return, so I didn't hate doing it. But he is still certainly a guy that, in general, I'm looking to target in trades this week. He is leading this team in routes run when he's been healthy. He's played in in the 3 games so far this season, and he's on the field a ton. We saw Jamison Crowder leave this game with an injury in League 4. It doesn't sound like he's going to be back this season, and we also saw McKenzie miss or leave the game with a concussion, which the way they're handling the concussion protocol these days, it wouldn't shock me at all if he has to miss a game. And they do play the Steelers this week, who've been absolutely horrible through the air on defense. So this really is shaping up to be a really big game for both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. So I think this is going to be Gabe Davis getting right in week 5. I still view Gabe Davis as a potentially high-end wide receiver 2 over the final course of the season. He's going to be the number 2 receiver in what's probably the best offense in the NFL. He's still extremely talented. I'm not really worried about these last couple games. It's been frustrating for sure if you roster him, but I mean he's on the field. They clearly intend to use him a lot. He just hasn't been quite right with that ankle. They're basically putting him out there as a decoy right now. But Gabe Davis is going to be a really good player. I still won't be shocked if he finishes the season with double-digit touchdowns. And it's just hard to get players with that much upside on your roster. You want to load your roster with as much upside as possible, and he's definitely a player that could help take you over the top this season. The next buy low for me here is going to be Josh Jacobs. I know it's kind of strange to have him on a buy low list given how well he played in week 4, but despite that, I think just a lot of people are still out on him. There are plenty of people that taken him off their draft boards this year. I only have him in 2 of my 5 leagues, but that's pretty high actually given how much or how rarely you end up actually with having a player. So I was sort of in on him this offseason, but not nearly as much as I apparently should have been. The team finally won their game in week 4 they stopped getting cute with the running backs. They'd been playing guys like Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden. Those guys were getting snaps, and they just sort of had enough of that, and they gave Josh Jacobs 34 opportunities, and he came through with the best game of his career. He had 144 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. I think he caught 5 passes as well, so he was a true workhorse this week, and I think that, I mean, he's just a good football player, and I think that's something that you don't really people don't give him enough credit for that. He's going to be a really talented player on what should be a good offense, so I think there's going to be plenty of scoring opportunities for him, and it was really exciting to see him be involved in that passing game. I think Josh Jacobs is going to be a high-end RB2 the rest of the season, and I don't think he'll just pay that. I think you can get him for low-end RB2 value, and I'd love having him. I mean, if you have Josh Jacobs and you want to try and sell high on him, I just don't know that you can. So to me, he's much more of a buy low, and just seeing if you can trade low-end RB2 value for him, I think he's going to be that you can play every single week, and he's going to do well enough for you that you're going to be happy with that. I think this is going to be the first time that I've had a quarterback on this list here. This is going to be Kyler Murray. He's actually pretty much been bad all year, and it's really shocking to see that despite that, he's the quarterback 6 in fantasy, and he's doing that without Rondale Moore for most of the year. Week 4 was the first game that Rondale Moore played, and he hasn't gotten Hopkins back yet this year. We saw last year how much this offense really did struggle when Hopkins went out towards the tail end of the season, so it's reasonable to assume that this offense is going to take a really massive jump once Hopkins comes back. And Kyler being the quarterback 6 in the season without Hopkins is just something that's really exciting for me. I think Kyler Murray does have a legitimate shot to be a top 3 quarterback this season. I think I have him ranked as like my quarterback 4 for the rest of the season, just behind Josh Allen, Herbert, and Jalen Hurts. But I think Kyler Murray is one of those guys that can be a difference maker for you at the quarterback position. Their defense is bad enough that they're going to have to put up a lot of points if they want to be competitive. So Kyler Murray is going to have some really massive blow up games this season, especially once Hopkins is back. And I just don't think you're going to have to pay all that much for him if you've got one of those mediocre quarterbacks and want to add in an extra player to trade up for Kyler. I'm in one league where I don't have. I've been playing Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers every single week, so I've been setting offers like Kirk Cousins and Brandon Cooks for Kyler Murray or Kirk Cousins and James Robinson. I feel like I may be a little bit overpaying there, but it's just that I think it's really difficult to win your league this year without having a difference maker at the quarterback position, just because there does seem to be a bit of a pretty significant drop off from those top tier guys to the next tier. So Kyler is the guy that I think can be a top tier quarterback producer for you this season, and I don't think you're going to have to pay nearly as much as you'll have to pay for guys like Herbert, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, etc. Next guy I'm looking to trade low on this season, or buy low on this week, is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. He's coming off of a couple bad games in a row. I think he had only 15 points in PPR last 2 weeks ago, and then he had 6 points this last week, 3 for 32, and he obviously missed week 2 with an injury. So he hasn't really done anything for you aside from his week 1 performance, and I think a lot of people are really just absolutely out on this Colts offense. They look horrible. Not even Jonathan Taylor can put up points this season so far. It's been really bad. Matt Ryan looks awful, and I do think that Matt Ryan is probably washed, and this Colts team is going to struggle, but their defense also hasn't been that great, so this Colts offense is going to have to try and put up points. I think that's been part of the problem, is that they have to throw the ball. Teams are basically daring them to do it because they're just focusing in on Jonathan Taylor because they're not scared of Matt Ryan. And I think that Michael Pittman's just so essential to this offense performing that he's going to be a massive target hog going forward. I think he's going to be a pretty high-end wide receiver 2, maybe even a low-end wide receiver 1 throughout the rest of the season. And I just don't think you're going to pay that. I had a league. This is my most competitive league. It's the league with the largest buy-in that I'm in. And a guy who lost Javonte came to me asking for Naheem Hines. And I managed to give him Naheem Hines and Aaron Rodgers because he'd been streaming Marcus Mariota. And I got Michael Pittman for Naheem Hines and Aaron Rodgers. So I think that's probably an outlier of an example. I don't think you're going to be able to do that very often. But I think that is an example of just how low people are on Pittman right now. So I think you can definitely take advantage of that and try and get him in your lineups. Next sell high for me here is going to be, or the first sell high for me here is going to be Chase Edmonds. I believe he made this list last week as well, but I really needed to emphasize how important it is that you try and move off him right now. He's just clearly the running back 2 in this Miami Dolphins offense. Raheem Mostert's clearly the guy that they like the most. It's not completely surprising given Mike McDaniel's familiarity with Mostert from San Francisco. I was tricked on this one as well in the offseason. I was a huge Chase Edmonds truther. I loved him in the offseason. I have him in several leagues, so at least I did. I've moved him in one already, but he's just not going to be a consistent fantasy producer for your offense. They're not really throwing the ball to the running backs enough for Chase Edmonds to be value, and really they're using Edmonds sort of contrary to how he's been used throughout the course of his career. He's sort of getting used inside the 20-yard line rather than being a passing down running back, so it's really strange to see him being used this way. He has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, and he just historically doesn't do that. I'd be shocked if he ends up with 3 more touchdowns over the course of the rest of the season. And honestly, this Dolphins offense is going to slow down a little bit with Teddy Bridgewater taking over for Tua. Tua is only listed as out for week 5, but who knows how many weeks Tua is going to miss with that head injury. So I just think that this Dolphins offense is going to take a step back. Edmonds isn't a very huge part of it, and he's been decent enough from a fantasy perspective that you can still trade him for something. And really, if you can get any real value out of Edmonds, I think you got to do it. The only real reason or opportunity Edmonds has to be useful is if Mostert gets hurt. So really, to me, Chase Edmonds is basically a handcuff, and I don't think he's being viewed as that quite yet. So it's time to get out on Chase Edmonds if you haven't yet. Another guy who made this list last week that I think I just need to bring up again is going to be Clyde EdwardsHelaire. The man has 5 touchdowns in 4 weeks this season. He's historically been really poor in the touchdown department. He hasn't been able to find the end zone. So this is a little bit of regression to the mean for him, but 5 touchdowns in 4 weeks is not something that's going to continue for him. He's in a pretty clear running back by committee. Him, Pacheco, and Jerick McKinnon are all getting worked into this offense. And honestly, when I watch them run, I think Pacheco looks like the better runner. I think Clyde EdwardsHelaire is probably better in the passing game, but Jerick McKinnon's even better in the passing game than Helaire. So Helaire is not really better than either of them at any of their specialties. So I won't be shocked if Helaire even eventually loses that first and second down role to Pacheco. He's important enough to this really talented and good offense in Kansas City. I think it's going to be a low-end running back 2 the rest of the season, but it's going to be inconsistent just because he's not getting enough volume. The touchdowns are going to fall off, and he's not going to be running back 1 at the end of the season. So if you can trade him for that value, you just have to. So if you have Clyde EdwardsHelaire, definitely shop him around. Just see what you can get. Another running back here that I'm looking to sell high on is going to be Antonio Gibson. He's been getting phased out of the Commanders' offense since week one. He's been getting less and less snaps, less and less looks in the passing game. They're using J.D. McKissick more, and Brian Robinson is going to be back as soon as this week, week 5. So there's a very realistic opportunity that Antonio Gibson ends up being the backup running back and sort of just takes over their kick return duties. They mentioned doing that in the offseason already. They hadn't named Brian Robinson their starter before that tragic accident that Robinson had. So, I mean, it's Antonio Gibson's been decent. He's been an RB2 so far this season, and I just don't think you're going to be able to get that for him at all. I have a league, the league that I'm 1-3 in here. I traded Antonio Gibson and DJ Moore for Cortland Sutton this afternoon. TJ Moore, spoiler alert, is going to be the next player I talk about as a sell high, which is a little shocking, but I was really happy to get rid of those guys and get a guy that I really trust. So I think that you can still get value out of Antonio Gibson just because his total season stats look decent, and I just think his outlook going forward is absolutely horrible, and I just don't want any part of Antonio Gibson. I think he's going to be probably the third running back in this Washington offense that you want to use. I think Robinson's going to be their first and second man back, and they love McKissick. McKissick is going to get the third down and passing down work. And finally, the one receiver that I'm looking to sell high on this week is going to be DJ Moore. I get it. He's not necessarily a sell high because he really hasn't done anything for you yet this season, but he's still got name value, and he had a decent week in week 4. He had 11 targets, ended up with about 11 fantasy points as well. So it's enough that you can maybe sell that as them sort of looking to get him more involved, but I just don't buy it. Baker looks absolutely horrible. This offense is running the fewest plays per game in the NFL, and it's not really particularly close, so they just aren't an offense that's going to be very fantasy friendly. They might end up being in enough garbage time this season that he can sort of PPR his way to decent numbers, but he's not going to be that high-end fantasy producer that we hoped when Baker got there. He's just not going to be, by any means, even a wide receiver 2. He's going to be a guy that maybe ends up being flex viable, and I think that you can get a lot more for him out of that just because of the name value and the positive outlook on those 11 targets. So I'd be looking to sell that and just get out. I think that DJ Moore, he's not going to be a guy I want in my lineups. He's just going to be a landmine, sort of like Allen Robinson was last year, where you're playing him every week hoping he figures it out, but he's just not going to this season. I don't see it happening. He's a good player, but Baker Mayfield's horrible. This coaching staff's incompetent. It's time to get out of DJ Moore while you can. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter @RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.